"You owe us $80,000 for raising you," my father said, pushing a spreadsheet across the table. I called my uncle. Days later, he handed me unexpected proof. I'm 34 years old, and I've finally reached a point where I no longer feel guilty about walking away from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. I never imagined I'd see the day when my own parents would hand me an itemized bill for raising me, a legal obligation they voluntarily took on when they decided to have children. But they did, and what followed changed everything. Growing up, the dynamic in our household was painfully clear. My brother Eddie was the golden child who could do no wrong, while I was perpetually the disappointment. When Eddie needed new clothes, my parents took him shopping at the mall for whatever trendy brands he wanted. Meanwhile, I received his hand-me-downs or bargain store items that never quite fit right. If I dared complain, my mother would lecture me about being ungrateful while my father silently looked on. The disparities extended far beyond clothing. When Eddie joined the football team, my parents never missed a game. They cheered from the stands and hosted team dinners, beaming with pride. But when I was selected for the state science competition after months of preparation, they couldn't attend because Eddie had a routine dental appointment. Their excuse was that I would understand because I was the responsible one. The favoritism became more financially pronounced as we approached college age. My parents paid every penny of Eddie's tuition at an expensive private university, covering not just his education but his apartment, car payments, and even spring break trips. Meanwhile, I worked multiple jobs while maintaining a 3.9 GPA at the state college, taking out loans to cover what my scholarships didn't. When I graduated with honors, my mother's primary comment was how lucky I was to have everything come so easily to me. But perhaps the most significant financial disparity began when my grandmother passed away. She had always seen through my parents' favoritism and had privately promised me part of her estate would help offset the financial advantages Eddie had received. After her death, I learned she had left me $145,000, an amount that would have paid off my student loans and given me a fresh start. Mysteriously, when the time came to distribute the inheritance, my parents informed me there had been complications and the money had been tied up in estate taxes and fees. I had no reason to doubt them at the time. Over the years following college, a disturbing pattern emerged. My parents frequently borrowed money from me for various emergencies, a roof repair, medical bills, or helping Eddie through rough patches when he couldn't hold down a job. These loans, which totaled thousands of dollars, were always accompanied by promises of repayment that never materialized. Any attempt to bring up these debts was met with dramatic sighs and accusations that I was keeping score instead of helping family. Despite these dynamics, I managed to build a stable life for myself. I advanced in my career as an environmental engineer, purchased a modest home, and created a small but meaningful circle of friends who actually respected me. I reduced contact with my family to occasional holiday visits and brief phone calls, which seemed to work for everyone. Then came the family meeting that would change everything. Last April, my parents called with unusual urgency, insisting I come to their house for an important discussion. When I arrived, the atmosphere was strangely formal. Eddie was already there, positioned beside our parents at the dining room table with an uncharacteristic solemnity. My father cleared his throat and explained that after much reflection, he and my mother had realized there were financial imbalances in our family that needed addressing. My mother nodded gravely, adding that it was time for everyone to take responsibility for their place in the family. Then, with ceremonial precision, my father slid a folder across the table. Inside was a meticulously organized spreadsheet titled Child Rearing Expenses for Elizabeth Reynolds. The document itemized supposed costs of raising me from birth to age 18. $13,650 for food and nutrition, $22,550 for housing allocation, $8,750 for clothing and personal items, $15,300 for educational support, $4,600 for medical care not covered by insurance, $2,850 for extracurricular activities, $7,300 for transportation services, and most absurdly, $5,000 for emotional labor and parental counseling. The total, $80,000. My mother explained in a rehearsed tone that they had given this matter considerable thought and concluded that while Eddie had contributed to the family in other ways, I had received substantial support that needed to be repaid. Eddie sat smugly, occasionally nodding as if this made perfect sense. "We know this might seem unusual," my father continued, "but we're not getting any younger, and our retirement funds aren't what we'd hoped. We believe this arrangement is fair given everything we've provided for you." I remained outwardly calm while internally reeling. The audacity was breathtaking. My mind raced through memories of working through high school to buy my own clothes, taking the bus because they wouldn't drive me to academic competitions, teaching myself subjects because they wouldn't pay for tutoring when I struggled, all while they lavished resources on Eddie. I excused myself to use the bathroom, but instead went to my car where I kept a file of financial records, a habit I'd developed after years of dubious family financial dealings. I returned to the table with my own folder and asked for a moment to speak. "Let me understand this clearly," I said, maintaining remarkable composure. "You're billing me for fulfilling your legal obligations as parents while Eddie owes nothing." My mother bristled, launching into an explanation about Eddie's special challenges and how he'd struggled in ways I couldn't understand. These challenges, as far as anyone could observe, consisted mainly of an aversion to responsibility and a talent for manipulation. I opened my folder and placed my own spreadsheet on the table. It detailed every loan my parents had never repaid. $7,500 for roof repairs, $4,200 for my father's dental work, $9,800 when Eddie totaled his third car, $5,300 for property taxes when they were short. The list went on, totaling $42,650. Then I asked about Grandma's inheritance. The question landed like a grenade. My father's face drained of color while my mother suddenly became fascinated with her wedding ring. Eddie shot them a confused look, apparently not privy to this particular deception. "I've been in contact with Grandma's attorney," I lied, watching their reactions carefully. "He mentioned some irregularities with the estate distribution." My father stumbled through vague explanations about complex legal issues, while my mother interjected about doing what was best for the family as a whole. Their evasiveness confirmed what I had long suspected. They had diverted my inheritance to themselves or Eddie. I stood up, gathered my papers, and delivered the most difficult words I'd ever spoken to my family. "I won't be paying this bill. Furthermore, I expect repayment of the loans I've documented, plus interest, within 90 days. I also want a full accounting of my grandmother's inheritance. If I don't receive both, I'll be pursuing legal action." The room erupted. My mother wailed about ingratitude while my father thundered about family loyalty. Eddie called me selfish and declared I'd always been jealous of him. I walked out amid their shouting, my hands shaking but my resolve firm. The following weeks brought an onslaught of manipulation. My parents alternated between tearful pleas and vicious attacks. My phone filled with texts ranging from, "How could you do this to the people who gave you life?" to, "You've always been cold and calculating, no wonder you have no real friends." Extended family members I barely spoke to began calling, urging me to make peace and respect my parents in their golden years. My Aunt Diana suggested I needed therapy to deal with my resentment issues. My cousin Patrick lectured me about the biblical commandment to honor my father and mother. Eddie's messages were the most vitriolic, calling me a heartless bitch who was breaking Mom's heart out of pathetic jealousy. He threatened that I would be cut off from the family forever if I didn't stop this madness. Rather than caving, each message strengthened my determination. I began researching estate lawyers and gathering what documentation I had about my grandmother's will. Through social media, I reconnected with my mother's estranged brother, Uncle Marcus, who had distanced himself from the family years ago. When I described the situation, Uncle Marcus wasn't surprised. He explained that he'd severed ties with my parents after witnessing them manipulate their way into controlling their father's assets while he was ill, effectively cheating Marcus out of his share of a family business. "Your parents have a pattern," he told me grimly. "They've always seen money as something to be extracted from others, not earned. They did it to me, to your grandfather, and now to you." Uncle Marcus revealed that my grandmother had explicitly structured her will to prevent my parents from interfering with my inheritance, having witnessed their financial manipulations firsthand. She had seen their favoritism for years and wanted to ensure I received financial support to counterbalance the advantages they'd given Eddie. Uncle Marcus had kept a copy of the will, which clearly stated that $145,000 was to go directly to me upon her death. The revelation was both validating and heartbreaking. My grandmother had tried to protect me from beyond the grave, and my parents had subverted her final wishes. With Uncle Marcus's support and documentation, I consulted an attorney specializing in estate fraud. The lawyer confirmed I had a strong case and suggested we also pursue the unpaid loans as part of a civil suit. He explained that while the statute of limitations had expired on some of the older transactions, many were recent enough to be legally recoverable. More importantly, the inheritance fraud had its own considerably longer statute of limitations. When I mentioned the child-rearing bill, my attorney actually laughed. "This document has absolutely no legal basis," he explained. "Parents have a legal duty to provide care for their minor children. They can't retroactively bill their adult children for fulfilling their basic obligations. If anything, this document demonstrates their exploitative intentions toward you." When the legal paperwork was filed, my parents' initial reaction was dismissive. My mother sent a message saying, "If you think some legal intimidation will work on us, you don't know your family at all." My father called once, attempting to reason with me in a condescending tone about how disappointed he was that I would resort to such measures. Their attitude changed dramatically when they were formally served. Suddenly, the messages turned desperate. My mother called sobbing, asking how I could do this to my own blood. My father sent lengthy emails explaining that they had only used my inheritance temporarily and had always intended to make it right, eventually. Then came the reconciliation attempts. My mother showed up at my house with my childhood teddy bear and photo albums, as if sentimentality could erase financial fraud. My father sent an offer to compromise by paying back half of what they owed. Eddie alternated between rage-filled threats and awkward peace offerings, clearly panicking as he realized his financial support system was in jeopardy. During depositions, more truths emerged. My parents had not just taken my inheritance, but had systematically marginalized me financially throughout my life to benefit Eddie. Bank statements revealed they had diverted money from joint accounts I'd contributed to as a teenager. Tax records showed they had claimed educational expenses for me that they had never actually paid. An unexpected ally emerged in my Aunt Corinne, my father's sister, who testified that my parents had openly discussed their plan to use my grandmother's money to pay for Eddie's failed business ventures. She provided emails where they had congratulated themselves on managing to reroute the inheritance without my knowledge. The case never went to trial. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of public humiliation, my parents agreed to a settlement. They would repay the full inheritance amount of $145,000, plus the documented loans of $42,650, with 5% compound interest calculated from the dates the funds were taken. The total came to just over $240,000. To pay this amount, they were forced to sell their vacation property and liquidate investment accounts they had been building for decades. The financial devastation was substantial, leaving them with just their primary residence and considerably diminished retirement savings. The aftermath was both liberating and painful. Eddie, suddenly cut off from his parental subsidy, sent a final scathing message accusing me of destroying the family before blocking me on all platforms. My extended family largely sided with my parents, viewing me as the villain who had bankrupted them out of spite. But for the first time, I was free from the crushing weight of their manipulation. I used part of the settlement to pay off my remaining student loans and established a healthy emergency fund. The rest I invested, following the financial discipline I had taught myself in the absence of parental guidance. Uncle Marcus became a regular part of my life, filling the role of family elder that my parents had failed to embody. His stories about my grandmother, her strength, her insight, her determination to protect me, helped heal wounds I hadn't fully acknowledged. He understood firsthand the pain of being financially exploited by family, and his perspective helped me process my guilt about taking legal action against my parents. 6 months after the settlement, my mother attempted reconciliation. She arrived unannounced at my home, visibly aged from the stress of the legal battle. She spoke of forgiveness and family bonds, but careful listening revealed the same old patterns: subtle blame, implied obligation, and no genuine acknowledgement of the harm they had caused. I told her I needed time, perhaps years, before I could consider rebuilding any relationship. I explained that such a relationship would require genuine accountability, not just convenient amnesia about their actions. She left disappointed, but perhaps for the first time, understanding that her wishes alone would no longer dictate my choices. 3 years have passed since that confrontation at the dining room table. I've built a life that reflects my values rather than my trauma. I've established boundaries that protect my well-being and finances. I've found connections with people who value me for who I am, not what I can provide. My parents occasionally send birthday and holiday cards, their tone cautiously respectful rather than entitled. Eddie has made no contact since his final message. I hear through family grapevines that he's struggling financially, having never learned to support himself without parental subsidies. Sometimes I wonder if I could have handled things differently, found some less drastic way to address decades of inequality and deception. But then I remember the meticulously prepared bill they handed me, the calculated effort to extract more from the child they had already shortchanged, and I know I made the only choice that honored my worth. The inheritance my grandmother intended wasn't just financial. It was the legacy of standing up for myself, of refusing to accept less than I deserved. In forcing me to fight for what was rightfully mine, my parents inadvertently gave me something valuable after all, the unshakable knowledge that I am stronger than the injustice they dealt me. And that knowledge, unlike money, can never be taken away. What surprises me most in reflection isn't that they tried to exploit me financially. That was consistent with our entire relationship. What truly surprises me is how long I accepted their behavior as normal, how many years I spent believing I somehow deserved less than my brother, and how much energy I wasted seeking approval from people incapable of giving it fairly. The hardest lesson wasn't learning to stand up to them. It was learning to silence the voice they had planted in my head, the one that whispered I was selfish for having boundaries, ungrateful for expecting fairness, and cruel for demanding accountability. On difficult days, I still hear echoes of that voice. But now I recognize it for what it is, not wisdom or love, but the lingering effects of manipulation. And each time I honor my own worth, that voice grows fainter, replaced by a stronger one that speaks truth. I deserved better then, and I deserve better now. In the end, the most valuable thing my parents taught me was what I had to teach myself. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who claim to love you but treat you as less than. Even, or perhaps especially, when those people are family.